Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Austin Smith-Jones, and I'm from UC Merced. I'm here today moderating our session, Building Your Brand One Story at a Time, and I'll get right into introducing our speaker. Jessica Deanda grew up in an immigrant household in Southern California, both food and housing insecure. Her experiences as a first-gen Latina student in higher education drove her to become the culturally affirming staff member she never had. Jessica earned her BA in Chicana Studies from UCR and her MA in Education from Claremont Graduate University. Jessica currently works as the program manager for the EW MBA program office at the Haas School of Business. She also advocates for the needs of Latinx staff as the chair of the Diversity and Advocacy for Alanza and as a member of the Dean's Staff Advisory Committee at the Haas School of Business. Please join me in welcoming Jessica to the virtual stage. We're so excited to have you, and take it from there.
Thank you. I have a confession to make. I never thought I would be here today. Do you remember when you were 8 years old? Picture your teachers taking you into a room full of all the books you read as a child. You get excited and they tell you, you can take as many of these textbooks as you want home. And you're like, is this Christmas? I have all these presents? And as you're stuffing your backpack full of books, you look around and you start hearing the sniffles. You start seeing your teachers and their faces just grief-stricken. A lot of the teachers are crying. And you don't understand why. You're confused. You're excited because you get a whole bunch of books, but you don't understand why they're so sad. And this is what happened to me as a child. In 1998, Prop 227 was passed. It essentially got rid of bilingual education. And at that moment, when I was 8 years old, I was put into English-only classes. I grew up only speaking Spanish. And I was in my bilingual education classes. I was learning both to read and write Spanish and English at the same time. But when this prop was passed in California, I was immediately put into English only. I was immediately told not to speak my language at school. I was explicitly told not to. And that's my introduction to education and my introduction into communication, where I was convinced that my story didn't matter, that I could not be understood, that I couldn't communicate. And then when I went to college and understood the concepts of white supremacy, I understood the concepts of cultural genocide. I understood the concept of being forced to assimilate, because it wasn't just I needed to learn English. It was that my accent became an issue too. And so I developed this one to be understood. And so when I went to college, I started paying attention to who's telling my story. How are Latinas depicted in the media? We see people like Sofia Vergara in Modern Family, and we see different caricatures of what people perceive Latinas to be. And I grew tired and I said, well, that's the last time I'm ever going to let someone else tell my story, because I'm an expert in my own story. I need to tell my own story. And more importantly, I need to teach other people how to tell their stories, because there's many things and many stories that we have in our own background that never get heard because we're not telling our own stories. And so that brings me to why we're here today. So, estoy aquí, I'm here. I'm Jessica Deanda, and I'm here to empower you to tell your story, because I want to hear your story. And more importantly, I want the world to hear your story. And I'm going to give you a little bit of context. So we're here to talk about personal branding, about how do you build your own story. So this is a number, 7,222, right? Big number. What are the possibilities? As I started to build my brand in 2020, I thought to myself, okay, my goal is to help empower other people to tell their stories. But I need to be able to connect to other people. I view the people that, the audience that I've built on LinkedIn in particular as 7,222 possibilities for me to connect with people, for me to help them tell their own stories. And I started to also build my brand every day in the everyday conversations you have with people. I started building it around campus. I'm a public speaker specifically focused on leadership development, specifically focused on public speaking. and empowering others to tell their stories. That is why I started building my personal brand. That's my purpose. And I'm very, very excited to help you build your own. And I wanted to give a little bit of context in terms of, before we get into the fun stuff, I really want to encourage you all to start really interacting with each other in the chat. Start, if something really resonates with you, put a quote in the chat. Put a question in the comments. Sorry, put a question in the chat. Start commenting with each other, reply to each other. Oftentimes when we're in sessions like this, we're like, okay, only the speaker has something to teach you. No, we're going to be doing some breakout rooms. I want you to learn from each other. I want you to encourage each other, because that's how you build your brand, through connecting with each other. So Austin and Marissa are going to be helping me today. And Austin will really keep note of all your questions in the chat. So also, when we do breakout rooms, I'll have opportunities for you to do some debriefing. Well, you could also ask me questions then. And with that, I want to do a fun warm up. And I'm going to describe it first, and then I'm going to have you, wherever you want, you could have a notebook and a piece of paper. I know it's after lunch, so it's kind of like, oh, I need some time to think here. I don't like being just like throwing you in a breakout room. So I want you to spend time on your own thinking about your favorite childhood memory. Type it up, write it down, however you like. I'm going to start. Loud. That was how I grew up in my household full of 7 siblings. Loud. I heard Mariah Carey. I heard Tupac. I heard Nirvana, Vicente Fernandez, Pedro Infante, all sorts of different kinds of music, tons of different conversations. It was chaotic in my household, let alone it was just disgustingly hot, the kind of heat that just you can't even breathe. I grew up in Southern California and we didn't have AC. So my favorite childhood memories actually involved my hammock in the backyard. And the silence just felt so good. And I was in the shade, so it wasn't hot. And I just saw hundreds and hundreds of hummingbirds, because we had a lot of trees that attracted these birds. And I would feel like the bird, there were so many birds, I would feel them as they flew by my face. I would feel the wind shift. And then I would also eat what are called loquats. And they're like this sour, sweet fruit in my backyard. And I loved it. The silence was just so good. It's so relaxing. If you ever want to relax, the hammock is your go-to. But that's one of my favorite childhood memories. And I just wanted to give that as an example. And I want you to tell me your own story. But again, I'm just going to give you 3 minutes. I'll let you know when to stop. And so we're going to, I don't know, what time is it? Hold on, give me a second. It is 1:54. So at 1:50, I'm saying 1:58, I'll have you come back, and then we're going to do a breakout room. So really pay attention. And I want to just give you the hint that really try to invoke the senses. What are you hearing? What are you tasting? What are you seeing? That's how you tell a story. So I'm just going to give you a second. So at 1:58, we'll come back. You're just right on your own. Great. How was that experience? I really want to have you all raise your hands. Don't be shy. What was challenging about it, or what did you really love about it? How was that experience for you? I'm seeing comments, and it was lovely, great. How was it to tell your story in a room full of people that you don't know? Great to meet everyone. It took me back to my childhood. That's good. It was nice. Great chatting and hearing about others' childhoods. Great. Nostalgic. I hear that. Nervous. I hear that too. It could be scary to talk about your own story. Thank you. That was just a warm up. That was just to get you warmed up and to really hone in on the fact that you already are a storyteller. Hold on. Doesn't go. Okay. This is a roadmap for today. We're going to be going over why should you have a personal brand? What is your story? Who is your audience? What are your goals, metrics, and then your personal brand story? So why does a personal brand matter? So these are the lies we tell ourselves. We tell ourselves, okay, I'm just going to, put my head down. I'm going to work hard and eventually people will notice me. And then we think, okay, this is a meritocracy. We live in a system, an organization or society in which people are chosen and moved into positions of success, power, and influence on the basis of their demonstrated abilities and merit. Those are all lies. So the truth is that we live in a society, it's white supremacy, right? The social, economic, and political systems that collectively enable white people to maintain power over people of other races. That's the society that we live in today. So if you think about this concept of, okay, I'm just going to be invisible. I'm just going to keep my head down. I'm just going to do my work. Eventually someone will notice me and I'm going to get promoted. That's not how it works. And that is exactly why it's so important, so pivotal for you to build your personal brand, because I want you to start being visible. I want people to notice you. I want people to be able to say, I know that person's story. More than I know that person's story, I'm inspired by that person's story. And here's the truth: power and influence. We already learned about power, white supremacy, that's power. But what's influence? That's what the personal brand can get you. Influence is the ability to deeply affect behaviors and beliefs. So how do you really become visible? How do you make the world notice you? You build your personal brand. And here's another caveat of the truth. We oftentimes think, a lot of us have this just world fallacy that we subscribe to. So it's the tendency to believe that the world is just and that people get what they deserve. And then because the world is fair, we often look for ways to explain or rationalize away injustice, often blaming the person in a situation who is actually the victim. I'll give you an example. So as a kid, I grew up both food and housing insecure, meaning I said, oh, it's my fault. I'm at fault for being poor. I'm at fault for being hungry. As a kid, I would say that to myself. And so I had a lot of shame associated with being born in poverty, right? And now as an adult, I'm like, wait a minute, that's not how the world works. The world is not just. The world is not fair. Therefore, how do I become visible? How do I make the world notice me? And in turn, how do I make the world notice you and help other people build their brand? So I keep talking about personal brand, but what is that? So a personal brand is your narrative that defines your purpose, your beliefs, your personal objectives, and your goals. And here, I love Kerry Washington. I love her brand. And she says, the world needs your story because the world needs your voice. And I wholeheartedly believe that. The world needs your voice. So this brings me to, well, what is your story? So your story is made up of 4 things: who you are, what have you had to overcome, what makes you credible, and what's your mission. This is just an example. This is my About Me tree. So there's a couple of things, and in a second, we're going to be doing another activity where you're going to be doing your own About Me tree, but this is an example for now. So what are some of the things that I've had to overcome? I grew up working class. I have a hidden disability. My native tongue is Spanish. But there's a lot of privileges that I hold. So I'm light-skinned, I'm cisgendered, I'm heterosexual, I'm a US citizen. There's some identities I love to talk about too. So I'm Mexican, I'm Ecuadorian, I'm Latinx. I'm also other things. I'm a content creator, I'm a marathon runner. There's lots of other things about me that I didn't put on here, but this helped me understand my brand a lot better. So I'm going to have Marissa in the chat put the instructions for building your own About Me tree. And I'm going to give you 5 minutes to write about it, to really get to know your story, to create your own About Me tree. So I don't know if she put that in there. Oh, thank you. So Marissa put the instructions in the chat, and I want you to go ahead and do your About Me tree, and we'll come back at I'm going to say 2:17. And I'll give you a minute warning. All right. I hope that was enough time for you all. I really hope that this practice helped you understand yourself a little bit better, but I am curious to know, were there any particular challenges you experienced when you reflected on what you've had to overcome to get here today? Was there any kind of ideas that you'd like to share with the rest of the group? before we jump into the next activity? No challenges. It was all exciting stuff. It was nice to reflect. Poverty, yeah. Self-doubt, yeah, I hear you. There's a lot of our identities that we keep hidden. I'm always concerned that I sound like I'm whining and I should just try harder. Yeah, that rugged individualism that we're taught in America is part of that as well, where we think that, you know, we start blaming ourselves for not doing better, not being seen. Fear of failure, I hear that too. Oh, loss of a parent early in childhood. I'm sorry to hear that. Surviving abusive marriage and relationship. Yeah, I hear you. A lot of stuff came about when you start writing. I hear that too. It's powerful. The fear of voicing up. Yeah. How I saw myself before and how I see myself now, and the tension between the two. Definitely. Yeah, the lack of support and finances. Yes. We have to start talking about these things, because I think it's layered again with this shame that we can't even just tell our own story. But it's really powerful because people like me need to hear it, because I don't want to feel like I'm all alone. And first gen, yeah, I hear that. Thank you for sharing. I really appreciate that. I appreciate your vulnerability. Trying not to overshare. There's part of that too, right? Where there's barriers to us communicating who we are. Being overlooked, definitely 100%. I want to hear a little bit more voices about your own identities. I'm going to give you a second to do that. Not a second. I'm exaggerating with the timing here. We're going to be doing a Mentimeter poll. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing this so I could share what I want to share in a second. Give me a second. And all of your stories. I want you all to hear it. Son of immigrants, definitely. I can relate to that too. I'm a daughter of immigrants. Disability, Indian American, cisgendered, multiracial, beautiful woman, survivor, wife, musician, mixed, fiery, warrior, queer, money, African American woman, raised by single Black woman, aunt, caregiver, English speaker, being the only one. I love the participation. Writer, creative, woman. There's a lot of women in this space. A lot of immigrants. Undocumented, survivor, curvy, Filipino American, Latina attorney, aunt, writer, child of immigrants, English as second language, beautiful. I think I saw the Filipino, single mom. Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate knowing who's in the space. It's really beautiful to see your voices. And it's really quite inspiring to see you all in this space. And you're here today having experienced all of that. Now, why does it all matter? Why does telling your story matter? Why is it so important to hear your voice and to tell your stories to other people? Why is that so important? Because we need to understand who is your audience. Who needs to hear your story? So who is not in the room? Who will benefit from your story? I was going to share my whiteboard, but actually I don't need to even do that. If you go up, it says Jessica sharing her screen. And next to that, it says view options. Click view options, click annotate, and then you can start writing in here. So who is not in the room? Who will benefit from your story? So think of it as generation. Is it a particular generation you're trying to hit? Is it location, race, ethnicity, gender, occupation, educational level? Who will benefit from your story? Who is not in the room? Can you participate in that way? No, or if it's hard, then you could also put it in the chat and we can see it there too.
So do you mean to say who else, like, you're representing, or, I'm trying to understand the question.
Great. Thank you for that question. Love it. It seems like other people have that question too. So who will benefit from your story, as in who's your audience? As you're building your personal brand, Yes, beautiful. I love to know your story, but you also have to be aware of who needs to hear your story. Who are you actually writing to? Who you're trying to talk to? So I'm seeing everybody, young women, the next Mexican-American woman, more female of color. Yeah, exactly. Children of immigrants, the next generation, Asian attorneys of color, very specific. Yes. First gens, managers, mixed race children, leadership. Absolutely. Undocumented communities, leadership, low income. Beautiful. I love that comment here. Everyone, obviously, yes, beautiful. Everyone would benefit from your story, but there's always the niche. There's always particular people that really, really, really need to be empowered by your particular story. And I want you to keep that in mind as you're starting to write, as you're starting to build your personal brand. So I'm seeing folks in power. I'm seeing those who feel invisible, women of color, first generation youth from working class families. Yes. Thank you. Appreciate that. Now I have to remember how to erase this. Let's see. I remember now. Okay. So I'm going to clear everything, but thank you. And I'm going to go to the next section. Keep that in mind. Who is your audience? So with that in mind, we're going to move on to what are your goals? Now that you understand your story, you understand who your audience is. We could flesh this out a little bit too, but what are your goals? Why do you want to build your brand? Why is that a thing? So there's 3 buckets here. You're trying to build your credibility, you're trying to build your thought leadership, and you're really trying to connect with your community. When you're building your personal brand, it's all about the people. It's all about people. You need to be able to inspire other people. You need to be able to connect with other people. Otherwise, what's the purpose? You're just speaking to who? To no one, right? So that's where this concept of who's your audience is really, really important. And you can learn as you go as well. So building credibility, you have to start sharing free content. So that could even be your time. It could be a coffee chat. It could be you're starting to mentor people because you're wanting to be known for whatever it is that you want to be known for. In my case, I'm a public speaker. So I started doing tons of coffee chats. I started really building out one person at a time. And you could also join communities. I'm the chair of diversity and advocacy for Alianza. So that's also how you start building your brand. Answer the questions you had when you first started. All of us are here at Berkeley, right? And we're all college educated. Some of us might not be, but that's great too. You're here. And what are the questions? How did you get here, right? How did you get here? Those are the questions that people like your mentees can have and you can answer. You also are trying to build thought leadership. So you're trying to share your informed opinions and share resources. At any point, it could be even in a meeting where you're in a meeting with colleagues and you're trying to build your personal brand. Every opportunity, you could start doing it. You could say, oh, I read this article and blah, 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 right? There's always opportunities for you to start building your brand. Now, this is the piece I love the most, connecting with the community. Who do you want to connect with? Who do you want to empower with your knowledge? That is very key to building your personal brand. And I'll give you a little bit, I think in a second, it's going to be a little bit more clear what I'm trying to say. And again, if you have questions, please start putting that in the chat. I also see someone put this concept of your audience being other women who feel overlooked, devalued, and underrepresented. I hear that. And other people are saying the audience is their own children, nieces and nephews. Absolutely. And here, this 80-20 rule. So so the focus here is on people and conversations. So you're spending 80% of your time building your brand, actually engaging, conversing, and commenting. This could be online, this could be in person. And you only actually spend 20% of your time promoting yourself. That 80-20 rule is very key to actually building your personal brand. And here's where I can provide a little bit more clarity. So what are the metrics? How are you actually measuring if you're actually building your brand? What does it even look like, right? So here, keeping track of your goals through metrics. We don't all have to have this fancy chart or this graph or anything, but keep in mind, I wanted to hone in, and mind you, your goals could be a little bit different, but you're trying to build credibility, you're trying to establish thought leadership, and you're trying to connect and empower community. People first, that's the lens. So every time I'm going to give you an example. These are just examples. So let's say you want another job, right? You want another job and you're like, okay, but how do I actually build credibility? How do I establish my thought leadership? How do I connect and empower the community? What is that? So let's say I want to build my credibility. Okay, I want to, let's say, work at the School of Law. I'm going to connect to 8 people that work at the School of Law. That's how I build my personal brand. I start talking to them. I start getting to know their stories. And then how do I establish thought leadership? I become known to those 2 hiring managers because I had already had conversations with their teams. I'm start getting to know all these people so that when the time comes and I see a role pop up, I'm going to move in there. And then how do you connect and empower community? Let's say I set up 4 coffee chats to connect to my audience. So let's say my audience were first-gen women. Okay, I'm part of Alianza. I'm going to make it a point to connect to 4 community members and empower them. Or let's say on LinkedIn, I'm going to make sure that I connect with 4 people on LinkedIn and make sure that I'm empowering them to tell their story. So whatever your goals are, let me keep it with a job. I'm trying to build a pipeline of other first-gen Latinas, let's say. And so I purposefully mentor 4 people per month. That's how I also build my brand. So that's just one aspect of it. So let's say for sure, because I heard a lot of things as well where people were saying, well, I want my audience to be people in power. So let's talk about sponsors. Let's say you really, really need a sponsor. A sponsor is someone that talks about you when you're not there. So if there's like an opportunity, they'll be saying something like, oh, Jessica would be great for that. I'm not privy to these conversations. They would be had not when I'm there, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. And people of color actually tend to be over mentored and under sponsored. So mentors give you advice, they help you think through things, but they don't actually have the power to sponsor you. That's the difference between a mentor and a sponsor. So if you're looking for a sponsor, you have to build your personal brand and actually connect with potential sponsors. So let's say your metrics are, okay, I need to connect to 5 people in a quarter. So this whole chart, this whole graph is per quarter, a quarter meaning in 3 months. So these numbers seem very like, if you think weekly, it could be a little overwhelming, but this is in 3 months. How many, if my goal is to meet 5 people, that means at least 2 people per month I need to meet. That could be potential sponsors. And then being recognized by 2 people. So I'll share a quick story. So I was part of this commencement where we had our MBA students graduate. It was really quite beautiful to witness and to see. And I was talking to one of the faculty members, just, small talk here and there. And she goes, oh, you're Jessica, you're presenting. And I was like, yeah. And I named like 2 other speaking engagements I had that week. And she's like, no, I'm talking about the Culture Summit. I'm like, oh, right. Yes, I do have that speaking engagement. So she actually ended up being one of my mentors, but potential sponsor. But she recognized me because I had been doing all of this personal branding. I've been doing a whole bunch of public speaking engagements. To be at that moment where I was talking to a faculty member at the Haas School of Business that recognized me was really quite beautiful to experience. And I want that experience for you. Whether or not you want to be a public speaker, I want you to be recognized for what you want to be recognized for. And then connecting and empowering the community. So how can I leverage the people that are potential sponsors to come and talk to Alianza members, for example? I do that a lot. So I work with a lot of people that could be potential sponsors, and I give them a stage to empower Latinx folks on campus, because that's also part of my audience. So there's just many different methods to, okay, what are your goals? And then how do you actually actively, tangibly make sure that you're actually accomplishing those goals? I hope that was a little bit clarifying. Are there any questions about this particular aspect of building your personal brand before I move on? You could put in the chat, you could raise your hand. Can you define promoting yourself? Great question. So promoting yourself can be through, I'll give you an example of how I started a long time ago. We have something called Wisdom Cafe as part of UC Berkeley. You have to sign up for it though. So it's open to all staff, and then they give out a newsletter, I think a month now, once a month or something. Anyways, I wrote an article for that. And so that's me trying to establish thought leadership. That's me trying to promote the fact that I'm an expert. Expert is a silly word, but that I'm really great at trying to uplift women of color, right? That was how I started. And then promoting yourself can also be social media. So what are you actively doing? You keep saying that you're trying to uplift women of color. Yeah, but what are you doing? So you promote yourself, but that's 20% of the time. Most of the time, I'm trying to encourage people to tell their story. I'm trying to connect with people. I hope that answers your question. How do you approach someone to be a sponsor? Is what I'm thinking you're trying to ask. That's a great question. So it's as simple as you want to take them out for a coffee, or you just want to connect to hear their story. And it depends on how high they are. So if you have a connection, typically when you make a connection, it's better to have someone that can do the introduction for you. So I'll give you an example. I was able to connect, I forgot her name, very high executive on campus, but I was only able to connect with her because I knew someone that she knew. And so when I sent her an email, like, hey, I would love to take you out to coffee just to hear your story. I was able to, in the subject say, referred by blank to talk about your leadership journey. So I was referred to talk to her. So that's how I manage my network and try to find a potential sponsor. That was a little bit higher up on campus. And I like to say this is the Barney method. The Barney method means that, and I don't know if I'm aging myself here, but Barney, the song, which is I love you, you love me. So when you're approaching someone to be a potential sponsor or mentor, you have to first tell them why they're so great, why you even approach them, and then you go into who you are. That's how you approach someone as a potential sponsor. How do you maintain relationships with sponsors and mentors over longer periods of time as your network grows, trying to balance for time? Beautiful. There are opportunities for you. You could say, this is where the metrics come into place, where you're saying, okay, if I want to connect to all these people, I also want to make sure that I'm still touching base with the people that I really, really want to stay connected with. So once per quarter, it could be an email, just updating them on your life, on your progress, on a question that you had, on a book they recommended, you actually read it just once. It doesn't have to be super detailed. It just depends on how close do you want that person to actually be to you, but it doesn't have to be like, I oftentimes feel that people think you have to constantly be in their radar. There's multiple ways to do that. So you can do like the touching base through an email, but you can also post regularly on LinkedIn or have some kind of presence, to get really involved and get on their radar. It doesn't have to be all the time. It can be once per quarter. I hope I answered that question. What's the difference between a sponsor and a mentor? Yes, a mentor does not have the power to give you a promotion or to help you really elevate your career. They could give you advice. They can help guide you as you're trying to figure out what to do, what your next steps are. But only a sponsor has the ability to say, I think they would be great at this, blah, 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 on the back end. Like you wouldn't even be privy to these conversations. That's a sponsor. And they have to be high enough in the organization to actually help you. Okay, perfect. Awesome, thank you. Any other questions before I move on? I know it gets complicated when you're thinking, okay, I have this huge network. Who do I stay connected to? How am I going to build this out? But that's where you have to really hone in and get centered on your story and who are you trying to empower? Who needs to hear your story? Once you're centered on that and you're actually actively doing that, it all gets easier because you're starting to clarify, oh, okay, that person will help me empower that other person. And you start being known for being able to do that. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Melissa. Sometimes a mentor knows the sponsors and they can put in a good word for you. Yep, that's exactly. How would you obtain the level of relationship with a sponsor so that they can vouch for you on the back end? Beautiful. Great question, Deborah. So that's where you, let's say you actually have an idea in mind for a sponsor. Let's say you're actually like, okay, I really want that job. Be very explicit. I want that job. I want that, right? Or I want to be known for that. I want to go to grad school. Be very vocal about what you're actually looking for, because that will help them understand how to best help you. You could tell them, right? Like, I want this. How do I get there? Always being very cautious that you're trying to get them to understand that you admire the way that they have progressed in their career. You're always trying to help them understand that they're very powerful, that you appreciate their time, etc., so that they can feel inspired enough to say, okay, cool, I want to make sure that I'm building this pipeline for other people to come by and to also elevate them. I'm going to move on to the next section, so we have enough time to go over it. And again, there's going to be moments for you to also ask me questions as we go. So what is your personal brand story? So we went over, what is your story? Who is your audience? What are your goals? What are your metrics? This brings me to my profile, so you can kind of see an example of what I've been talking about this entire time. And you've already got to know me a little bit in terms of what am I all about? But let me talk to you a little bit about my audience. So this is my LinkedIn profile, not all of my about me section, but my titles, I wanted to really get people to understand what I'm all about. So I'm a program manager, but my audience are employees and students. I have larger niches, but for this conversation, I'll just say employees and students are my audience members. I'm a board member, which is like less than 5% of Latinas are board members. And then I work at UC Berkeley Haas School of Business. But what's my story? How do I get people to engage with me? How do I get people to, really try to connect with me? And so I ask a question. I ask, do you ever feel like the only one at school or at work? Again, with my audience in mind, employees and students. My experiences in college as a working class first-gen Latina have driven me to provide the culturally affirming support and advocacy for students and staff that I never had. I have over 10 years of experience building diverse, equitable, and inclusive spaces for students and staff in the nonprofit and higher education sectors. I foster staff and students' sense of belonging through blah, 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 blah. So I'm very explicit in naming what I want to be known for, what my personal brand is. I mentioned leadership development. So being very explicit with who I am, because I've done these exercises of, okay, I understand my backstory. I understand who my audience is. I understand my goals, and I understand my metrics. So it's just one example of how you can actually visually build your personal brand through LinkedIn. Any questions on this? So Melissa said volunteering for committees in different areas help you to meet people who may be outside of your normal circle and help you meet new mentors and sponsors. Absolutely. That's also how you build your personal brand. You could say, I'm a volunteer because I really care about this group of people. Oh, thank you. Someone told me that was well written. Thank you. Appreciate that. It's funny. I'll share a story. I wasn't going to share this story, but I'll share this story. I was doing a personal branding workshop for MBA students. And I had red flags. I'm not joking. Those magnifying glasses were red flags. And I was telling them, okay, yeah, this is cool. This is how you could really write out your about me section. And then I was like, oh my God, wait a minute. Red flags are not a good thing. Let me go in and update that. So all this to say that it could be changing. It's not going to be a solid, that's your story forever. You could uplift different aspects of your story. Let's say I was interested in marketing. I would completely revamp this. So depending on your interests, it could change. And that's okay. Just like you are changing, just like you are evolving, just like you're learning a lot today. You could go back, you could make shifts, you can make changes. It's not perfect. I see here a comment. I also think that sponsors can come from non-senior roles in an organization. Absolutely. Absolutely, Joelle. Some junior folks have solid influence or credibility with leadership or proximity to leadership. And sometimes even someone only slightly more senior than you can help you obtain opportunities that you wouldn't otherwise have access to. Absolutely. 100%. Now I want to give you all the opportunity to start talking to each other. So I want you in the breakout room to talk to each other. And Marissa, if you could put I don't know if I have instructions for everybody, but if I do, please put those in the chat. But I want this breakout room to be, I'm going to give you 5 minutes. No, I'm going to give you 8 minutes to be in that same group that you were with earlier. And then we'll come back and we'll debrief. So 8 minutes to talk about your story. Who is your audience? What are your goals? What are your metrics? It's okay if it's not perfect. That's not the purpose of this. You're just practicing. You're just telling your story. You're just hearing other people's stories. If you're not ready, that's okay too. And I'm giving you an opportunity to just connect with each other. So I want Marissa to put those instructions. Oh, thank you. Thank you for putting that in there. And Marissa, if you could send everybody in a breakout room for 8 minutes, that'd be great. All right, welcome back, everybody. I hope that was great. I'm pretty sure some of you were cut off mid-sentence, but thank you so much for hanging in there with us. I just wanted to ask you, as you reflected on this experience of getting to tell your story and who your audience is, what are your goals, what are your metrics, what came up for you? What did you enjoy about the process or didn't enjoy, found challenging? You can put that in the chat too if you'd like. Or you could raise your hand. It was challenging and fun to talk about metrics. Some of us still to be determined. Metrics was a bit of a challenge. I hear you. It could take some time to develop that plan. Uncomfortable to be vulnerable? Absolutely. Is it safe to be vulnerable? This is definitely a question to consider too in this space. Thinking about the audience and metrics and threading together my story. Enjoyed listening, asking questions, and being interested, curious to hear what others had to share. Beautiful. I love that. It was good to reflect over the journey thus far. Someone put their LinkedIn. Great. Awesome. They're already thinking about building their brand. Priscilla for president. I love that. Using their challenges as their strength now and making differences. Yep. I'm making a difference. Absolutely. Keeping that in mind, I wanted to tell you one thing. If you don't remember anything from this whole entire workshop, I want you to remember that you're a big deal and I need you to start acting like it. And I wanted to give you all the opportunity to connect with me on LinkedIn. So that's how you can further this conversation, further learn, further engage and thinking about your own story. And I also wanted Marissa to put in the chat a link to a Google form where you can work with me one-on-one complimentary on your personal brand. Go ahead and fill out that form. You can fill it out by tomorrow. And then I'll reach out to you to set up a session for us to really work on your personal brand one-on-one. And thank you for putting that in there, Marissa. Appreciate that. And now I wanted to give you the opportunity to ask me questions, but I'm also going to give you a second if you want to scan that QR code. But I wanted to give you an opportunity to ask me any burning questions that you might have before our session ends today. Any last minute questions? Do you ask people to be sponsors or mentors, or can it be unsaid based on contacting them and sharing your story? Absolutely. It depends. So I like to be blunt, and I'm just like, I would love for you to be my mentor. The sponsor piece, no, I don't explicitly say that. But I am very clear about what I have to offer. So I'm very clear about my brand, and I'm very clear, like, I want to empower, depending on the conversations, I would say I want to empower Latinx folks. In order to do that, I would love to, and then being very clear with my sponsor, I would love to be able to educate more people. I would love to be a speaker at your next meeting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it just depends on the conversation that you're having with a particular individual. But you can be very explicit. How can you identify the right sponsor for the right time in your career? That's a really interesting question. I think what we oftentimes forget, though, is who's already in our network that could be a potential sponsor. And we just haven't touched base with them in a while. So it could be like previous professors. It could be someone that you had already met and just forgot about. And so I think it can help to also look at your network that you already built now, but also to be very explicit with the mentors that you have now to say, I want that position, or I want to get to that title. How do I get there? People already have that title now. Why not reach out to them? That could be another way to do it too. Any advice for building a personal brand when your career experience has been varied and when you don't necessarily want to remain in the same field you're currently in? That's a great question. So you have to be specific about what field do you want to get into and who are the people that are doing the job that you want. Those are the people that you would connect with. Those are the people that you start building your personal brand with. Those are the people that you start asking questions to. I hope that was helpful. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that Marissa can share the her screen. So let me, I wasn't even sharing my screen. Oh no, I was, there you go. Now she can share her screen. But do you have, yeah, absolutely. Anthea, I would love to work with you on your personal brand. Any other questions that you have? I know it's been a long day. Any other questions? If not, I'm going to say good luck. You got this. And I hope the world is more than ready, actually, to hear your story. Okay. So start telling it. Start building your personal brand one relationship at a time, one story at a time. You can do it. I promise you. Yeah. Thank you. Have a wonderful afternoon. I'll see you in the other sessions. Bye, everyone.